Доброго дня, шановні.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Today at Ukraine Crisis Media Center, we continue the project Diplomacy Without Borders. And today we have a meeting with the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Ukraine in Turkey, Andriy Sybiha. Thank you very much for being with us today. Good afternoon. And on the 3rd of February, there will be the anniversary of establishment of diplomatic relationship, 20 years. So we will have celebrations on the 3rd of February. And this is the anniversary of establishing diplomatic relationship between our countries. And we have a lot of results. We have strategic partnership supported by economic, cultural ties, and friendship. And in 25 years, we concluded 121 agreements, and we have turned over $4 billion, and also we have a lot of flights between two of our countries, and many flights are carried out, and Turkey is our key partner in the region, and Turkey supports territorial integrity of Ukraine, and it has principal position on the issue of Crimea, and all this is supported by real steps. And third committee and the resolution, and Turkey was co-author of this resolution, and in this resolution it is identified that Russia is aggressor and the territory of Crimea is occupied territory. Last year, Turkey provided help $50 million to Ukraine, and in 2 years they provided 65 tons of humanitarian help to IDPs and residents of frontline area. And also in Turkey, our children come to Turkey, the servicemen's children, and this is real strategic partnership. And this strategic partnership will continue. And our presidents also communicate, and we had 3 meetings last year, and were regular telephone calls, and this is really important for our bilateral dialogue. Thank you. Could you tell us, please, in more detail about prospects of cooperation in economic and investment sphere? As I noted before, now turnover is about $4 billion. Unfortunately, during last years, we see the trend of falling of turnover, and yearly it falls 20–25%. That's why we see as our main task to stop this negative trend and to start growth of turnover. But there are also important aspects. With Turkey, we have positive balance. We sell more to Turkey, both services and goods. So $800 million. Also, during last year, we saw increase of Turkey investment, $60 million rise, and also in the territory of Turkey, there are about 600 enterprises with Ukrainian capital. So the founders or co-founders are the citizens of Ukraine. So this is mutual cooperation, and continuing with strategic partnership this year, is the year of our strategic partnership. Real projects are implemented, and the basis of this partnership of political process, there should be also economic component involved and also military cooperation. There were a lot of agreements in this area, and also I would like to remind that at the end of the year, on the 31st of December, they signed the agreement, and Turkey will provide to Ukrainian forces $3.1 million, and this program is for 5 years. So if everything is okay, Ukrainian armed forces will get each year $3 million of help each year. So this is real help. And in other areas, we have a lot of prospects. For example, the decision of two sides about the term of our citizens up to 90 days. It is also favorable to the development of such cooperation, and we will continue to simplify the travel of citizens to both countries. And last year also we recorded for the first time that Turkey was visited by more than 1 million tourists from Ukraine. Comparing with the last year, this is 50% growth. And also the number of Turkish citizens also rise 30%. And I'm convinced that further steps in simplifying of our relationship will lead to positive effect to establish business contacts. And also, we plan this year to carry out intergovernmental meeting. Last meeting was in Kiev, and also important aspect of last year, we signed the agreement on transportation, and this agreement opens new prospects, and we hope that those obstacles that were in communication between our states that will be overcome in the nearest future.
Could you please tell more about cooperation in the transport sector? I slightly mentioned this issue. We are neighboring countries. We have joined sea between us. That was ferries are very important in our mutual transportation projects, and the ferry transportation could be successfully used for business development. Also, last year we established good air routes, regular air routes between Kiev and Ankara, the two capitals. How do you assess the possibility of further cooperation with Turkey in energy area, including the context of better relations between Turkey and Russia? Ukraine remains and wishes to remain the reliable partner for energy partner for Europe and for our neighbors, and of course we try to diversify our gas supplies at the same time, and we respect the Turkey's energy projects, but we continuously emphasize that the Southern Stream 2 and Turkey Stream 2 are the projects which put under threat the interests of the European states and Turkey, and we encourage Turkey to use our gas transportation system. By the way, Ukrainian GTS supplies up to 20% of its total gas supply for the needs of Turkey supplies. Do you see any opportunities for cooperation in the educational area between two countries. This is a very prospective direction. Last year, we discovered that Ukrainian education is of interest for Turkish consumers. We found a lot of interest among Turkish students willing to get education in Ukrainian higher educational institutions. Now we are looking for proper legal framework for this initiative. We've established also an initiative of the Ministry of Education, and all together we will create a special intergovernmental agreement which will allow the students from both countries to get education in the higher educational institutions of two countries. Also, we agreed with Ankara that in the Ankara University they will open a course of Ukrainian language in the chair of Slavonic languages. Recently, Turkey, after unsuccessful coup d'etat, has approved political courses towards normalization with Russia. Whether you see here any threats for us? I do not think that we should demonize this relations. We should not take an approach and think that strengthening of relations between Turkey and Russia would automatically deteriorate Ukrainian cooperation with Turkey. Ukraine and Turkey are strategic partners, and we show a good example of win-win relations. We continuously maintain dialogue at all levels and continue to strengthen and broaden our relations in all areas. Turkey is an example of, so to say, long time Euro integrational effort, and still it is not a member to the European Union. How do you think whether we should learn these lessons, whether we should explain this with different political forces coming to power? I won't bound this to any political forces or changing powers. Turkey is a country which clearly understands its interests and continuously makes efforts to reach them. Turkey has 720 billion of annual GDP and almost 70 million of population. And today we clearly see how effectively the European Union and Turkey cooperates, even despite the fact that Turkey is not the EU member. From January 1st, they very proactively carry out the customs negotiations. I would like to quote here the Prime Minister's statement that the European project could not be finalized without Turkey, and stretching further this logic, I would like to say that the European project could not be finalized without Ukraine. Keeping in mind the security situation in the country, what could you advise to our tourists? keeping in mind the security situation, I would advise our citizens to stay alarmed and prepared when they are in the country. Nevertheless, there were more than 1 million of Ukrainian tourists visiting Turkey last year, and that's why I recommend those tourists to follow out our recommendations, which you can find on our website, to comply with those requirements, and keep in mind that there are always threats of terrorist attacks. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the audience? Roman Kos, Crimean News. Your predecessor, Ambassador Mr. Hersonsky, very proactively maintained cooperation and ties with Crimean Tartars. This is the first. What is your policy in this area? And the second is about FTA between Ukraine and Turkey. We continue this approach of close cooperation with Crimean Tatar diaspora in Turkey. In general, we have almost 7 million, or a bit more than 7 million of Crimean Tatars in Turkey, and we visit this community quite often with local with the representatives of local Crimean Tatar organizations. Also, we welcomed Mr. Dzhemilev here, and I participated in his meetings with Crimean Tatars. The voice of Crimean Tatar community is rather strong inside the country. That's why we have very proactive policy in this area. In February, we have scheduled one event with Crimean Tatars, and the second is scheduled for May. And by the way, in all those areas where Crimean Tatars reside here in Turkey, they always have two banners, two flags shown together. They have the Crimean Tatar flag and Ukrainian flag. Also, answering your question about FTA, we continue our negotiations via video conferences. We have some dozens, 1,800 outstanding issues out of several thousand, which we had to coordinate between the experts. For example, for tomorrow, we have video conference scheduled. Of course, we approach to the FTA agreement as the win-win agreement. Yamats Maria, UCMC, you mentioned that Ukrainian children attended Turkey. These were children of IDPs and ATO servicemen for summer camping. Could you specify about exact numbers? We had 2 visits of Ukrainian children for recreation and rehabilitation services. This project is under direct patronage of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey. These children came to Antalya, and there were almost 1,500 of those children. And in March, we expect one more group of children. And my second question is about mutual investments. Could you please mention or specify the sectors of investors, the most popular sectors for investors in both countries? As I mentioned, in the last year, total amount of Turkish investment to Ukrainian economy raised $60 million and mounted to $140 million. The bigger part of this goes up to 30% goes to industry and communication sector and also retail trade. When we look at Ukrainian investments in Turkey, the majority of Ukrainian entrepreneurs invest in industrial enterprises and into services sector. For example, recently I attended the launch of Ukrainian meat processing plant in Turkey. Serhiy Malarchuk, Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. Mr. Andriy, would you please mention your ambitious plans as an ambassador? What are the projects of your specific attention and what do you strive to achieve in your everyday work? I can characterize my intentions very briefly. I would like to fill our strategic partnership with very concrete specific projects. For example, political cooperation. We have scheduled the group of political planning for recent future and we will organize bilateral meetings of the presidents of both countries. The meeting between the summit of the presidents will happen during first 6 months of this year in Kiev. And one more aspect about which I'm concerned. In Ukraine, we can find Ukrainian products in any store, even food store, while in Turkey the situation is very much different. You cannot find easily Ukrainian products there. So this is the biggest area for me to improve. We should strengthen our mutual trade. The nuclear power energy, we have scheduled special research and innovations conference to which Ukrainian experts are invited. And we expect best results from it. Then we have military and defense cooperation. And also education, which I also mentioned that we are trying to intensify bilateral exchange in this area. And some other sectors which will contribute to the bilateral relations. Now, and about human factor, we make steps towards intensifying the mutual visits of people with private visits. I won't announce our objectives in this aspect well in advance, but please believe me, we are working hard. At the same time, Turkey respects territorial integrity of Ukraine, and our political dialogue is concentrated around this topic, and we plan a lot of bilateral contacts on this issue in the future. Any further questions? Could you please introduce yourself? I'm a correspondent from DAN, Turkish news agency. After organization of after an attempt of murder, Russian ambassador, whether you feel yourself in more danger, and the second question, whether the flows of tourists had grown or dropped during the last year. Thank you for your attention. About the security situation in Ankara, probably you know that there is the special status law which is enforced in Turkey, and we remember about this, and we take into account all those risks. Of course, we made steps strengthening the security of Ukrainian embassy in Ukraine, and not just of Ukrainian embassy. We just, like other embassies of other countries in Turkey, we followed the recommendations of the Turkish authorities. Also, as I mentioned, during the number of Ukrainian tourists to Turkey had been growing continuously during the last year. The last year, we had more than 1 million tourists, Ukrainian tourists, who attended Turkey, and we are fifth country in a rating of countries whose tourists attend Turkey, and this is due to the fact that Ukrainian tourists feel that they are well cared, well accepted, and that they feel Turkish hospitality, and that's why they like to go to Turkey. And at the same time, I could not but mention the regions of so-called Ottoman Belt, which means that in Ukrainian territory we have some minorities who belonged in the past to the Ottoman Empire. Also, Turkey is famous for its excellent historical and heritage, for good climate and for spa resorts. That's why the tourists like it. Thank you very much, Mr. Pasal, and we will finish with this. Thank you.